Welcome back to My New Experience, guys, and today we have a guest whose journey is one that I know is going to resonate with so many of you. It certainly resonated with me. Now, the guest we have is Jenessa Oliver, and she's a senior user experience designer, and she's successfully made the leap from the technical world of software engineering, test engineering to be specific, to the creative and empathetic world of user experience design, or experience design, as I've been saying in my recent videos. Now, she's done this in just 3 years, so she's not only found her footing, but she's risen to a senior role. Now, I cannot be happier when I introduce Jenessa to us all. Jenessa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Desi. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic, and it's a pleasure that you're on the show with us today. So, we're going to start at that pivotal moment for you, because I know everybody wants to find out more about that, as do I. Now, many people in technical roles are curious about UX, but you actually made the jump. So what was the catalyst for you? And what was happening in your role as a test engineer that made you say, well, I need to be on the other side of this. I don't want to just be building it. I want to be designing it. What was that for you?
Well, I actually don't know if you had like a bug somewhere in my office and heard me actually say that phrase, because I think I said something very similar. I remember I was at a point where I had been working as a test engineer for maybe 3 or 4 years, and I was on a new project, and myself as well as the development team just had way more questions about what we were building than we had answers. We didn't understand a lot about it, and this happened at a time where we were ramping up our user experience team at my company, and so I just got curious. I didn't know exactly what it was. I knew some things about it, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And I found myself networking with people in the office, some of the new designers that had come on to the scene. I started asking questions and I got very curious, and I was like, that's what this is? That seems like something I would be great at. And it wasn't as simple as it sounds. I found myself at the beginning wondering if it was truly something that was for me, or if I just wasn't happy where I was as a test engineer. But through trial and error, talking to people, doing my own research, I found that this was a space where my inquisitive mind would just thrive. I naturally have that. And so I found that UX was more of it was still surrounding the quality assurance space, right? It still had everything to do with that. It was just at a different, it was at a different part of the process. And so I looked at it as leveraging everything that I had learned about, delivering quality in the QA space, but utilizing all of those questions that I would have that I did find were causing some people frustration, because the time that I was asking them that wasn't the time frame where those questions needed to be asked. They needed to be asked up front. And so I started talking to people at my company. I networked with so many people on the UX team. And I tried to make a case for myself, and I asked for help where I could. And outside of those 3 years, there was like a 6 to 9 month I want to say like transition phase where I was balancing QA duties and I was shadowing UX designers, and it was a really interesting transition. Yeah. But that's really what it was. I always was interested in the quality space, but I found that my talents served not just myself, but everyone much better at the beginning versus at the end where QA was.
That's amazing. And that's absolutely fascinating as well, because, I think many people see testing and designing as completely different worlds, but how did your background in software testing, and you touched on it a little bit as well, that analytical, detail-orientated mindset actually become your superpower as a UX designer or a senior experience designer?
Well, in the beginning, I think what I found was the easiest to try to apply to that UX space, or that UX part of the process of software development was, for lack of a better term, I got really good at breaking things. As a QA, you kind of have to find, I mean, that's what you're there for. And there are always going to be bugs in software. You're not ever going to be able to eliminate them all, but the goal is to have someone find those issues before a user does, right?
Oh, wow.
So that you can be made aware of them. But if there were limitations with the software because of how it was designed, then that only goes so far. So I think making that connection, that we save so much money if we think about these areas that of concern before the software is built.
Yeah.
That was like what made it make sense to me. And then once it made sense to me, it was very easy to just talk to other people, get their buy-in. And I won't say that it was easy. But it has to make sense to you, right? And I would give that advice to anyone who's transitioning into UX, or from any discipline to another. I think that when you think about transferable skills,
Yeah.
it's never going to be one to one, but there are always going to be experiences from your past that if you can demonstrate how you can use those skills that you've built in that time in your life towards what the goals and the needs are for this new space that you're trying to enter. I think that's a great way for someone uh, to provide value in the space that they're trying to break into.
I'm just thinking about some of the things that you were able to do as well in the previous career that you had, the ability to identify edge cases, understand the system constraints, advocating for the user, writing user stories, and trying to make sure that what you test against, which is our user stories, kind of like make it, well, you're able to pass, with those tests, basically the tests that you run. And so that in a way, for me, I just find that so fascinating. And so you've made that switch. You're officially a designer, going from that world, understanding that, making that your superpower now. And that's just amazing to understand and learn a bit more about. So what was the steepest learning curve in that first year for you then? Because you have the superpower now, but what was it like becoming who you are now?
Ooh, let's see. The steepest learning curve for me, I would say, given that I'm a naturally artistic person. I draw, I paint, I create art in my everyday life. I do nails. You don't see them on me now, but I know you've probably seen them in the past when we
Yeah.
I do my own nails. And so I just have a natural artistic ability, but I've never trained in art in any form. And so there were the visual design side was where I had to immediately start filling some gaps, right? That those were things that I there were standards and guidelines that I just did not have as a baseline for my skill set. And so, reading articles, talking to other people with strong visual design skills, reading books, all of that, that became like, I would say that's what I focused on the most that first year. And then I think the other part of the learning curve that was like, I think just I needed to, even though I found this way into UX with the testing background, testing in the space of UX is much different. Testing and validation is much different than testing in QA. And so I had to adjust some things. I still had that testing mindset, right? I still had the ability to look at something with context about an end user that may use it, but still keep myself in an objective position to try not to bias, the results too much. But that was going to need to be applied very different. And so I had to brush up on the different types of validation and testing. There's so many different methods. And so I would say those two would be the two biggest things. And I would say I would add one more thing. I think the third thing was managing how overwhelming it felt to be in this new space,
Oh,
especially at where I was in life.
yeah.
I had peers that, were very much established or much more established. And I was starting as a newbie basically in
Mm,
this new field. And
yeah,
so I had to put myself back in a position to, I don't even want to say put myself back in a position to, because I do believe in lifelong learning, but I had
yeah.
to be comfortable with the fact that I was going to have way more questions than answers for the people that I worked with. And we were going to be navigating that journey together to find those answers. So yeah, getting comfortable with that was also, an adjustment.
I know some people kind of like talk about imposter syndrome and things of that nature, and that I think that kind of like lends itself to developing things that are less tangible, or the challenges of potentially developing less tangible skills, like such as well, Figma's a tool you can see that, or Sketch, whatever it is that people might be using. But the less tangible stuff are kind of like the soft skills that all of a sudden someone who is a designer or ex-engineer or even an engineer or a BA, you have to develop those skills in order to be able to communicate your craft. What was that journey like for you in your first year?
That was the area that I realized I had been holding myself back in, because it's something that
Okay.
I developed that skill. I didn't realize it, but very young, navigating totally unrelated, but honestly, navigating different dynamics within family and things like
Mm,
that. That was something but I didn't like doing it, right? I didn't like
yeah,
it because when you're dealing with, family issues and things like that, that's not a comfortable space to be leveraging those skills. But as I got older, I realized, oh, these mediation skills that I developed as a youngster come in handy when I'm talking to someone who is very technically,
yeah,
focused mentally, and they're speaking to someone who's much more on the business side. And that's actually a skill that I first discovered would be valuable in my career when I was in QA. My first junior QA position that I got, I was a contractor for a company that
mm,
they have a reputation. I'm not going to say who they are, but they definitely, there were some challenges, especially for someone just entering the field. So I found my groove being on a team with developers and a program manager who could never ever get on the same page. It was
wow.
like one was speaking Dutch and one was speaking Mandarin. They just could never ever, like, ever. And I would be in these meetings, obviously observing in my,
Mm,
junior QA, with my junior QA hat on. I'm looking and I'm just like, all I can see is, what's this person trying to say
mm,
versus, and how is that coming across to this person, and how is, based off of what this person is saying, how is that shaping what they hear from the other person. And
yeah,
so that was a skill I learned there, and learning to be a liaison was where I was able to, that was the soft skill that I truly do think was valuable for me throughout my QA career, but then the transition as well, and then just becoming a UX designer, because I do think that is an essential piece. You're going to be talking to people from different worlds all the time, and
mm,
and you UX is kind of situated in the middle of these worlds, where, as stereotypically, engineers tend to be a little bit more reserved. They're a little bit more introverted. And so if they can avoid conversations, if they can not have conversations, especially, verbal conversations, they would much
yeah.
rather, not do that. And so being a bridge between these two worlds that have very different communication styles and speak these different languages was my jam. It was
Wow.
definitely my jam, but there were challenges at the time. I had not become comfortable speaking up.
Mm,
Um, especially when there were people that were higher in seniority than me. I had um, this like default view of myself, where I felt like if someone had a title that was higher than mine, I probably shouldn't speak in it or say anything that might
yeah,
be going against what they were saying, right? So
yeah.
that was something I exercised. That first year was very uncomfortable. I remember I remember like having to do design reviews, and my camera would be off in the beginning because I knew I was like breathing and breathing hard. Like I was having to like do like this 4x4 count thing where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it. And I would be doing that, in between meetings. If I was doing a design workshop,
Yeah,
I
to
would
control
use
the nerves and stuff, right?
yeah, if I would
Yeah.
have to like pause and do these things. And so now I guess I've learned and I've grown because I truly don't get nervous anymore with these people. But that was something that I did struggle with. That first year, it was very, very hard for me.
I love that point, what you talked about when you mentioned a lot of the things that you've learned now is because of some of the things you faced earlier on in life. And I think this is a great gem for anyone who's watching, because it's easy to run away from challenges that we face in life. But instead, sometimes it's good to ask, what are those situations trying to teach us that will enable us to grow personally? Personal growth is one of the most rewarding things that can pay you tenfold later on in life, and it's clearly served you well. That's amazing. But your journey, Jenessa, is kind of like leads perfectly into the topics that I'm really excited to kind of like talk about with you a bit more today. I want to dig a bit deeper because you talked about finding your voice. You mentioned the importance of that as a UX practitioner and the UX superstar, and so for a new junior designer, or someone in a big company, you talked about that as well, how that can be intimidating. But how does the phrase finding your voice, what does that mean to you in a practical sense?
I would say it's for me, it was highly dependent on understanding what value I wanted to bring, right? Like
Yeah.
I needed to understand um, who I was, how I could be of service to others, and that's I think that's where finding my voice started. If I was approaching, my job just as a job that, I wasn't really invested in how I showed up, how other people perceived me,
Mm.
I don't think I would have put that much thought into it, and I don't think I would have put much thought into my growth in that role. But when I realized that there's things that I can contribute here, I need to understand what those things are though first before I can
Mhm.
expect anyone else to understand it. And
Yeah.
so that's what I think is the foundation of finding my voice. And once I started to do that, um, it was almost immediate seeing how other people responded to it. And it wasn't
Wow.
I want to be very, very clear. Like, I think there's a term like faking it till you make it,
Mhm.
which I thought that's what I was doing, but I really was just trying to get through certain experiences. It wasn't faking it till you make it type of thing. It was like, I just have to get through this meeting without vomiting, right?
Yeah.
But after each challenging experience, especially during that first year, I found myself like, I found myself reflecting on what happened, and,
Mm.
and having uncomfortable conversations with myself. And so when I realized that there's something I bring to the table, but I am not honing in on that, and that's making the output, the things that are coming from me, it's confusing. So other people aren't going to see it. So it was for me, it was imperative that I understood who I was, what I brought to the table, and how I could continue to bring more of that to the table, to different tables, right? Because different
Yeah.
tables are going to have different needs, right? And so that was foundational for me.
Wow, 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 that's so interesting. And may I ask as well, was part of like finding your voice, was part of that using data eventually when you're going into those meetings with the program manager and the engineer and so forth, and they're talking their different languages, but then at first perhaps you're going in with one voice, and then you're seeing everything, soon after making your transition. But then later on, of course, no doubt you've probably become someone who people depend on because they want to say, well, what does the data say? What's the user actually doing? How does using data with what you do in your role, or how you function as a senior UX, designer practitioner, how does that help you personally when you are using your voice?
For me, it gives your stakeholders, whoever you're interacting with at the moment, it gives them a much more unbiased. It backs you up in a way that I just don't like this, or I just feel this. Those statements, that way of supporting supporting a design decision doesn't get you very far, because human beings, everyone has an opinion, everyone has a feeling, right?
Yeah.
And not only that, but it helped me educate other people as to what UX is here to do, right? Like I think some people, especially at my company, had this viewpoint of almost that we were magicians, and that we just use telekinesis to understand what does this user really want, like we all know that that's not the way that that's not at
Yeah.
all a valid. We don't ask them what they want. We understand we explore their problems.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that I would say it helped them understand that this is not witch's brew. This is science, right? And and
Ta-da! Here you are.
right. So it helped them understand that, so that they understood how to look at and perceive the points that we would bring up, the things that we would bring to them. But then also, I feel like it helped them understand that if you're using either rank or certain experiences, or certain, not experiences, but if you're using your position to just go in a direction that is fueled by your own feelings and
Yeah.
opinions,
Yeah.
that might,
Use your position to pull rank, right? And go like we're
yeah.
going this way. Yeah. Yeah.
And not saying anything negative about that, really just speaking to how that really, like, for the company, does that serve us really at
Yeah.
the end of the
Yeah.
day?
Yeah.
Because if we don't have evidence, if you don't like it, but we don't have evidence that that's not the feedback we've gotten when we've tested it, that's not, been proven through validation, then
Mm.
at the end of the day, who are we building it for? You, or are we building it for users? So
Yeah.
it helps us, but I think it also helps the people that we work with.
A huge part of doing that is using the voice in a way in which we can champion the user, which is clearly what you're doing, and you're doing it successfully so as well. And that always starts with research. Now, it's important to get that buy-in for research, right? But getting the buy-in is a common struggle, but you've been able to do that successfully. So I want to get tactical for a minute. Now, a designer sees a problem and they believe that maybe research is the answer, but their PM or their manager or their program manager, they're focused on shipping features, right? Instead of trying to define what the outcome should be, right? So what are the outputs that will lead us to the outcome? No, I just want to ship features and look busy. So what's the first step they should kind of like take? Or has there been like a similar nameless situation that you could remember where something like that has happened, and you've kind of like come in and helped to try and steer that ship? And what was that like?
If I were to give advice based on my experience, and this is something that I'm still currently working through at my company, but I think that you are going to have to put in extra work to prove yourself. You're going to need evidence, and you might need extra evidence. I have tried tried different types of presentations to show kind of the danger of just
Mm,
pushing out features that have not been validated, or if they have been validated and we understand that there are challenges, not resolving those challenges could pose
yeah.
some issues down the line. I do think that one thing that always people's antennas get going when they hear things about money. So I think that, if
Mm,
you can find ways to demonstrate how certain research or research findings, testing results not being addressed could cost money down the line. I think that that leads into like a UX designer, especially a new UX designer, learning more about the business of UX because we work very closely with that side, and so I think that's important. I think one thing that I've was challenged with is not fully understanding constraints in that first year. And business constraints are a thing. And one thing that does most of the time it does get people's attention is when you start to bring up the idea of losing money or just how money the revenue would be impacted if certain things are not considered.
yeah,
um,
yeah.
we're still in the process of working through some of those challenges, right now.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
I think that that does help.
So beyond getting specific projects approved, there's that broader challenge, right? Because we got tactical for a moment, and that's been very, very awesome. That's been great. But then, we have to try and navigate corporate politics, right? That's a given. It's easy to say you don't like politics, but the reality is that in any organization of any size, politics is common. And what's a common political trap that you see as a now senior UX practitioner who's going to be seeing more strategic over tactical task ahead of you? So now you're starting to see the balance of seeing beyond the pixel, seeing beyond the canvas, and now you're seeing kind of like what the business, as you were mentioning, what the business benefits are and how things work, attached to or even inside the boardroom. So how would you advise, or what kind of advice could you give to help a UX practitioner kind of like avoid falling into some of the common traps that a UX practitioner could fall into when it comes to politics? Is there anything that you've done that's helped to keep you sane, basically?
Oh yeah. Outside of yoga, um,
Which is
I
actually a great outlet, by the way. Yes.
it is. But as far as like within the workplace, I think it's reducing the instinct to make assumptions about people and why they may do the things that they do, why what their motivations may be. I would advise a young designer to be objectively curious, which I
Mm,
think is a skill that you need in design, anyways. But I have in navigating politics at my company and even at companies before I was even in UX, it is very easy to write someone off based off of a maybe a difficult conversation or just even observing them interact with other people. It's
mm,
very easy to make a judgment and say this person comes off as this way. I think that does a UX designer, especially a young designer, a lot more harm than good to jump to conclusions in that way. It's always smart to be observant, but we as human beings, when we make judgments about people and things, that influences our behaviors and our actions, right? And so it can lead, if you are not careful, those jumping to judgments and conclusions about people can it can block off opportunities for synergy, right? We, at the end of the day, you have to work with people, and if you are just cutting people off because of maybe a maybe not conflict, but maybe just feeling uncomfortable in the moment working through something, you rob yourself of the opportunity to learn from it. And
mm.
so and I think that that's you need to learn, you need feedback, you need reflection to grow. You need that on an individual level, you need that on an organizational level. And so fostering understanding and enlightenment about people and things and environments and all of that is
Yeah.
essential. You have to understand it's truly like UXing the UX process. If you were to take that approach
Yeah.
on a project, it you'd probably have a pretty crappy outcome.
Yeah.
You can't write someone off because of what seems to be negative or what may seem to be like a contentious scenario that you've been placed in with them, because there may be a reason for that and it may not have anything to do with you, right? So I think it's important to try to shed that as much as you can as a UX designer. You that space, there's not a lot of room for it. There's, you have to use your best
Yeah.
judgment at times, but um, yeah, that I think
I
that's
love that.
what I would say.
How do you build alliances? So to show that UX is seen more as a collaborative partner than just basically like a roadblock. Oh, don't go to UX; they'll just say no. Or kind of like the arts and crafts department. You touched on it earlier. Actually, just we're creating spells, and here we are. Poof. Here you have it. You have your rabbit out of the hat. How do you change the narrative? In terms of kind of like what you do at your place of employment. What do you do?
For me, it was about starting from a place of understanding, right? Being able to hear people's perspectives, and
Mm,
they painted UX in a good light or a bad light, hearing what was really behind that
yeah.
frustration for them. Um, you can't take it personally. You have to have, tough skin. You have to, I mean, just imagine if you took a design review personally, that would you can't do that. But even when you're stepping outside of, that specific type of interaction, there's you have to have the ability to hear problems and understand that you, or your team may be a part of that problem, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that that doesn't mean you're bad, but it just means this is someone else's experience, right? And we are creating experiences for people. That's a part of our jobs. And if you
Yeah.
don't understand their current circumstance, what they're currently experiencing, and if you can't give that space, you're going to rob yourself of being like a full-fledged UX designer. And also, I will add this too: every place that you work at is going to be different. And so if you get so rigid in thinking that it just must be this way and I'm going to apply this framework because it worked at this last place, your framework, if you're not hearing what other people are saying about your beloved framework for doing things, or the structure that you've built for doing things, if it's not working for other people,
Yeah.
then it's not providing value. And at the end of the day, that's what you want to do. And
Love
that,
that.
in order to understand if it's providing value, you have to talk to the people that you're delivering to, right? And
Yeah.
so I always say, like, uh, our are end users are the recipients of our products, right? Our software products and our experiences. Maybe I like that whole experience designer title that you've been using. And so they're ingesting the experiences that we create. And UX is not the only the only group involved in that, right? Like,
Yeah.
if we look at the analogy, because I love analogies too, Desi, the analogy of a road trip, rarely is there just one guy, unless it's like National Lampoon and you're that dad that just wants to drive the whole time. But unless it's, there's rarely just one person in the driver's seat on a road trip. And so at times the UX will be in the driver's seat, then it will be development and things like that. So if you guys aren't working together, you're going to end up in the middle of nowhere because you guys did not coordinate. You didn't have a coordinated plan of attack for the task that you've been given. So we have to work together. We have to. It's imperative that we work together. And collaboration is beautiful. I welcome it. I think it's important. And anytime that there have been opportunities to add more collaboration at the appropriate levels,
Mm.
I think it's a beautiful thing.
I want to touch a little bit on your career growth, and also I just want to say, Jenessa, as well, thank you so much, because I have been emphasizing a few questions from different angles, and it's just to make sure that so some of our valued viewers, they kind of like, it really resonates and they get the point of what it really means to kind of like grow in different areas. And seeing you and learning from your experiences, I think, is a key opportunity for everyone as well. So I want to touch on kind of like your career growth a little bit, and you've become, a senior UX designer or experience designer in 3 years. That's really a testament to your impact, to you being able to implement what you've learned, your talent and those things, translating what you've learned as knowledge into principles, and then balancing those principles. And that's what's created the impact for you to get to where you are. So congratulations, first of all, even though it's belated, because you've been that for a while now, of course. But what for you defines seniority? Now, some people will say it's about mastering Figma, or some will say it's about influence and mentorship, or developing soft skills, which is lacking in many junior designers because they're just trying to figure out the tools, right? But what for you defines seniority?
I think it's a balance of both, right? Like as you grow um from, and I guess this is my interpretation of
Yeah,
it. As you grow
absolutely.
from a junior to a senior, like you said, juniors are more focused on, understanding how to utilize these tools. They're wrapping their head around the space of UX through tools. It's much more tactical. Like it's not, they haven't elevated to that strategy level. And I feel like senior is approaching things with a strategy mindset.
Mm.
It's much more, you you are executing, planned out missions versus, just executing a task. And
I
so
love that. I love that. Ambition, that's great. Get to the moon and back, and everyone's like, no, I just need to get onto the ship.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So I think that's what I would say. That's how I would define a senior for myself, just reflecting on where I kind of started to emerge as a senior at my company. I think that's where that line was. I started to have much more of that strategy mindset. But on top of that, I will say that's why I said I think it's a balance of both, because I think that
Mhm.
you can have strategy mindset, but if you haven't mastered those more like low, I don't want to say lower level, but those pieces of a mission, right? If you haven't accomplished those things, it's very hard to develop a strategy if you don't have that as your foundation, right? So both are a part of it, but I personally would not call myself a master of Figma. I know it enough to do what we need to do. And yeah, I think that the strategy is what separates you at that point.
Now, this has been incredibly valuable, Janessa. I cannot tell you how much this has been valuable, not just to me, being able to interview you and just have this catch up. This has been awesome, but also to our viewers as well. So, as we wrap up, what's the one final piece of advice that you would give to a designer who perhaps may be feeling a little bit frustrated, who knows that they have good ideas, but their voice isn't being heard yet? What kind of advice would you give to a junior designer who's starting out their journey?
I I think I would tell that designer that, one, breathe. It's just the beginning. Like you are in the early stages. It will not you will have different frustrations. Don't worry. These frustrations that you're dealing with now are going to seem so small in comparison to what you may face in the future. But I think it's important for you to understand that those frustrations, just like your users' frustrations, are opportunities. They're things that you can learn from. You can UX yourself, and you can find the gaps in your interactions with people, your process, all of that. You can UX yourself, and you can use the process to get better as a designer. I think another imagined scenario, if you were in another country, someone plucked you from your home and threw you in another country that speaks a different language, think about how far frustration would get you. Not very far. You'd just be frustrated, and still no one would understand you. There are things that you can do, right? Like the whole scenario where, there's pictures that you can draw to find a bathroom and things like that. Those are bred out of a lack of being able to communicate with the people around you. And so there's opportunity. You have to, instead of sitting in that frustrated space, you have to take a step back and say, okay, if I'm gonna get through this, what are the first few set of actionable steps? And I also understand that you do not have to have a fully executed plan from start to finish to start working on things, to try to start improving things. You can maybe just have one or two ideas for the next step and try that and see what happens there, and reflect on what happened and continue to make improvements. But stay curious and stay hungry. And if you truly love this, you will find that joy in UXing yourself, UXing your process, UXing your world. So just stay curious.
This has been a fantastic conversation as well. Thank you so much for being so open, for sharing such practical advice as well. Now, where can our audience connect with you and follow what you do?
The best place right now would be LinkedIn, but I do have a goal for this year to start writing about my experience as a designer. And so if you follow me on LinkedIn, you will see in the future something coming out with my new Medium account, where I'll be posting about my experience as a UX designer and some of the challenges that I've faced. I've started to really enjoy talking about this stuff now that I kind of feel like my head's above water a little bit. And so I think it's, important for me to share those things that I've learned. So stay tuned for that.
Fantastic. Well, I certainly will be staying tuned. You love talking about that. I certainly love listening, and I'm sure all of our viewers and listeners will enjoy listening and watching as well. So excellent. We're going to have those links in the description below as well to you and your professional profile. So thank you again for being on Mind the Experience.
Thank you, Desi.
So guys, that was absolutely amazing. Jenessa's story is such a powerful reminder that your unique background isn't a weakness. It can be your superpower. Whether you come from engineering, testing, support, or any other field, you can bring a perspective that basically no one else has. Now, finding your voice, of course, isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being the most prepared, empathetic, someone who's trying to build alliances, championing the user with confidence, turning your unique insights into a real impact, as Jenessa has done. So ask questions, be curious, do the research, and remember that your perspective is needed now more than ever. So UX your life. Be great at what you do. Stay present, stay curious. I'll see you next time.